Hello everyone, I'm Michaela Kathleen, and in this video, I'm doing my March reading wrap-up. I read 4 books in March, starting with This Is Where It Ends by Marieke Nijkamp. And this book was just a nothing burger for me. I rated it 2 stars. It is a book about a school shooting, and it's quite short, and it's multiple POV, so we just don't really get enough character development for any of the characters. And I just didn't care about any of the characters. And when your characters are in such a high stakes situation where any of them could die at any moment, you really need to care about them. And Harry. Oh, Harry. And overall, I just felt like it didn't delve deep enough into any of the topics it was exploring. Obviously, it's about a very heavy topic. It's about school shootings. And so that's something that you don't want to just surface level that kind of a thing. You want to have like a deep, meaningful exploration of such a heavy topic. And whether that's like going in deep on one character, whether that be one of the victims or the shooter themselves, I don't know. It broached a lot of different topics besides just the shooting itself, like sexual assault and other things. And because it was so short, it didn't go deep on any one topic really. So I think it just kind of really was a miss, and I honestly wouldn't recommend it. Here, Harry, you lay next to me. So after that, I read Eats, Shoots, and Leaves, which is a nonfiction grammar book focused specifically on punctuation. Harry, no! You can't lay on that. Please. Please just lay next to me. Oh, we're building some kitchen furniture and Harry's trying to lay on the pieces. Anyways, so a nonfiction grammar book focused on punctuation. My husband actually gave this to me years ago. We're both editors, so yes, we are the kind of nerds who give each other nonfiction grammar books. And this is actually kind of a lot about the history of punctuation, and it's told in like a very light, humorous way. So even though it's nonfiction grammar, it's still like a fun read. I don't know why I was still holding it. My favorite nonfiction grammar still remains On Writing Well by William Zinsser. I think William is his first name, which I read during journalism school for college. But this one was fun. It definitely had some interesting facts in it since it is more focused on the history of punctuation. For example, there was some typesetter way back when who tried to popularize using backwards question marks for rhetorical questions, which I thought was kind of cool. Again, editor nerd here. And yeah, obviously the humor of it is kind of highlighted in the title. The title is a joke that, you know, a panda walks into a restaurant, eats some food, fires a gun, and leaves because of a misplaced comma or a unnecessary comma instead of actually eating shoots and leaves. So yeah, if you're into grammar at all, I would recommend it. There was one really completely random, out of nowhere, totally unnecessary, like judgmental, slut-shamey abortion joke, which was just like, why is this in a grammar book? So that like threw me off, but that was just like one like very random joke that was in the book that was not funny. So yeah, this was the second book that I read in March. So then after that, I read a highly anticipated read, and that was Dread Nation by Justina Ireland. This was a 5-star prediction for me. I don't think it was in my 5-star prediction TBR tour that I did like a year or 2 ago, but that was only because I didn't own it yet. If I had owned it, it would have been on that TBR tour as a 5-star prediction. Although I do think that I already knew about it by that point, and like I had it on high on my wish list for purchasing. And it was like already a 5-star prediction, even though I didn't yet own it. That being said, I went into this book a little bit wrong about the exact circumstances of the book. This is a book that is about a zombie like apocalypse around the time of the Civil War, and I went into it thinking that it was going to be during the Civil War and the zombies have just begun to rise, and everything is just completely haywire, 2 wars at the same time. But it turns out the main character was born like 2 days after zombies began to rise on the Battle of Gettysburg, and then the book actually takes place when she's like 16 years old, I'm pretty sure. So it's actually 16 years after the apocalypse, the zombies have begun to rise, and the Civil War was pretty promptly ended after they began to rise 16 years ago, because people pretty quickly figured out we need to fight zombies instead of each other, which, is that giving humans a little too much credit? Perhaps. So for that reason, it just wasn't quite as action-packed as I was expecting, not quite as fast-paced as I was expecting, and I did not end up giving it 5 stars. I really reserve 5 stars for like all-time favorites, but I did give it 4 stars because it was still very good. The character work is excellent. I especially love the main character's sort of enemy to friend relationship that she has. Not one that you see very often, not an enemy to lover, enemy to friends. Or maybe it just doesn't get as much attention. And even though it wasn't quite as action-packed as I was expecting, and I didn't love many of the fight scenes at the beginning of the book, the like big battle at the end with like a large group of zombies was excellent. Loved it. One of my favorite fight scenes that I've ever read. And I am really excited for the sequel. I think it ended with a really nice setup for like, here's what you can expect the next book to be about, and like what it is sounds intriguing. So yes, I will probably reread this first one in like a year or so and then pick up the sequel. And then finally in March, I read The Grace Year by Kim Liggett. And this one is a feminist dystopia. By that I mean that the world that the characters are living in is extremely anti-feminist, but the book is saying this is bad, let's be feminist. And I also rated this one 4 stars. I think I liked it slightly more than Dread Nation, mostly because I really liked the ending. I wasn't so sure at the beginning, although this is also one that got better as it went on. But at the beginning of this one, there's there's 2 female villains, the main character's mother and one of the Grace Year girls. I have not explained the concept. Let me explain the concept. So in this book, in this very small, isolated community, the men are all oppressing women in every way that they possibly can. And one of the ways that they're doing that is by saying that women have magic powers, and that at the age of 16, they need to be sent out into the wild, all of the 16-year-olds for that year, to kind of expel their magic so they don't have magic anymore, so that they're not dangerous. And, I mean, spoiler alert, magic doesn't actually exist in this world. It's something where these men are sending these girls away for an entire year to be in these terrible, terrible circumstances in order to break their spirits, essentially, is the goal. Another spoiler alert, if you're wondering how they're getting away with convincing people that girls have magic powers, it's because the girls that are sent away are sent to this island where the well where they drink the water is poisoned to make them have hallucinations, etc. And so they end up believing in their own magic powers because they're being poisoned for a year. But my concern with the mom and one of the Grace Year girls being portrayed as villains, and at the beginning of the book, kind of as like the biggest villains. Certainly they're portrayed more harshly than any of the male characters. And my concern with this is I feel like a lot of feminist dystopias will have a female character almost come off as more of a villain than any of the men, without really acknowledging that these female characters are also victims. And like, I'm not saying it's not realistic or true that some women can kind of like contribute to their own oppression and be really terrible towards other women, but when you're in a society that's this dystopic, like obviously this doesn't apply to like, for example, the governor of South Dakota, because we still live in a like relatively free society. But in the Grace Year, every single woman born in this community is intensely traumatized every single day of their life from the day they are born. And so these women have no power to be real villains. Like, obviously, some girls are handling it better than others, and you wish that they could all handle it as well as the main character is, but that's just not reality. And yeah, these villainous girls are just doing whatever they possibly can to survive this society. But the book does take the time to come around and kind of invert the trope, and does like really acknowledge these characters are not villains. And actually, especially in the case of the mother, kind of spoiler here, she actually turns out to be a secret hero of the story. Her daughter just doesn't have all of the information. Her mother is looking quite villainous when really she's not. She just has to hide the fact that she's being a hero, otherwise she'll be murdered. So I appreciated that the book really was specifically kind of setting us up to think like, oh, another villainous female in a feminist dystopia, when really no, the book is taking its time to be like, it's not possible for women to be villains in this society. This is a book that I think really lends itself to a reread because there are a lot of twists in it. Some of the twists are extremely predictable, but some are not as predictable, and once you read them, you kind of remember things from earlier in the story and you're like, oh, this twist makes perfect sense now that it has happened, but I did not see it coming. So I feel like it would make a really good reread. Some problems with the book, because it's definitely not perfect. One of my biggest problems was the pacing is kind of off. Like, I don't like in books when just months pass from page to page and it's not made like super clear. I think that might have been a little bit on purpose because of this takes place during their grace year, and most of the girls spend most of the year being drugged. And so for them, time is very wibbly wobbly. And so I think maybe that's what they wanted for the readers as well, but it just didn't really work for me. One thing that I've seen people say is that they felt like the romance in this book was really unnecessary. I didn't love the romance, but also there's a twist in the book that the romance had to happen for the twist to happen. Might be being too obvious here. And then like related to that, people on Goodreads, I've seen reviews where they're like, oh, the main character didn't really change much of anything, like very incremental change. But I really liked that because again, it feels really realistic. No one person is gonna take down this society. And so I like that the main character made a change, but it was really, really tiny. And honestly, mostly what she did was realize that some of the women who she thought were contributing to the society really aren't, and now she has some female allies. She has this big group, but then also she does find a couple of good male allies, and they're all kind of working together for like really tiny incremental changes, which unfortunately is how it works. And part of that is, spoiler alert here, is her having a daughter and being like, ah, my daughter can also carry this forward. So yeah, I really like this one. I tend to like feminist dystopias and also dystopias in general. I feel like dystopias are the books that make me think the most and the ones that I can't stop thinking about after I'm done reading them. So this one definitely wasn't perfect, but it does make you think, which I really enjoy. So those were all of the books that I read in March, a mostly good reading month. Let me know down below what you read in March. I hope you enjoyed watching. Remember, words matter.